I'm Fred Wallace along with Denise Reed. Thank you so much for joining us on Living Well, Giving Well on Rogers.
This is Rogers TV.
Everyone, and thank you very much for coming this afternoon for two very informative seminars. I think you're going to have some fun. For those of you who are attending for the first time, we don't want you to have too much fun. Our first seminar is about the evolution of Mustang and is being presented by Natasha DeMellis from Haggerty, who has the 67 Mustang known as Raven. And she'll fill you in on more on that. Then for color commentary, one of our esteemed judges, Hunt Palmer Ball from Kentucky, has the owner of the most awarded 1967 Shelby Mustang. And that car presented here back in the 2017-18 period, and it won its class, of course. So they're gonna walk you right through from the inception right up to today. And Hunt Palmer Ball, feel free to ask him some questions because he knew Carroll Shelby quite well. For those of you staying on for the second seminar at 2:15, it's the ultimate automotive lubricant experience. And Terry Pitcher, who's the business development specialist at Chevron, is going to tell us all about different lubricants and how they can help us and help the performance of your vehicle. And it's going to be really interesting. So anyway, I'd like you to welcome Natasha DeMellis.
Welcome to the evolution of Mustang. Today we'll take you through a brief history of one of the most iconic vehicles of all time. From inception to launch, from first generation all the way up to 2024, you'll learn to fall in love with the famous pony car. But before I get started, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Natasha DeMellis, and I've been the Regional Event Coordinator for Haggerty since February 22nd, 2021. And I wanted to give this seminar today because, well, I tend to have a sweet spot for Mustangs. So much so, in fact, that I decided to create an alter ego known as Mustang Marie. I started Mustang Marie back in 2014, where I used my platform to showcase my passion and love for the brand. My claim to fame is due to my VIN and data plate decoding. Yes, I memorized Mustang VIN codes from 64 to 73, so I can read a Mustang VIN number and tell you what year it was manufactured, what body style it is, what engine is in it, all based off numbers and letters because I am a little bit crazy. In 2015, I went to every single Barrett-Jackson auction and documented Mustangs at their events. I was going so frequently, in fact, that Barrett-Jackson actually started following me on Instagram. At the time, they were only following 251 people, and I was one of the 251. I have also been able to make connections with Dimbesti Motorsports out in Windsor, California, RK Motors in Charlotte, North Carolina, RM Auctions, which is right here in Ontario, and it was also featured on the 2016 issue of Autostrada magazine. So McKeel Haggerty was actually featured recently, so I actually beat him to the punch. But it wasn't until Blue Oval themselves came knocking on my door. It wasn't until Ford that led me to my big break. From 2016 to 2020, I was the senior social strategist for Mustang, and I was working at GTB, Global Team Blue, which is one of Ford's marketing agencies at the time in Dearborn, Michigan. In 2018, I was officially added to the Mustang Enthusiast Board at Ford Motor Company, and I was the only non-Ford employee ever to be allowed on that board. I was also the social content manager for the GT500 Track Tour program from 2019 to 2020. Now, during my time at GTB, I became the SME, subject matter expert on all things Mustang, and have actually won awards for the projects that I led with Ford Motor Company. For example, the Make It Personal campaign, the 10 millionth Mustang, and even National Mustang Day. But the 10 millionth Mustang was actually one of the most successful Mustang activations in both reach and volume, projects I am incredibly proud of. So, am I a car enthusiast? I think that probably says it all. Pretty sure I was a car in a previous life is basically what I tell everybody. But what are some of the vehicles that I own? Well, my daily driver is a 2017 Ford Focus RS. I just picked up a 2024 Big Ben Ford Bronco with the Sasquatch package. But, ladies and gentlemen, the absolute love and joy in my life is this girl right here, my Raven. She is a 1967 Ford Mustang GT Fastback. She's Raven Black, hence her name, with matching numbers, original engine, original transmission, original body, original interior, original markings from factory, and yes, you're looking at original paint. Do I ever get tired of saying the word original? Absolutely not. She's got the S-Code 390 cubic inch engine with the 4-speed top-loader manual transmission, because say it with me now, hashtag save the manuals. She's only got about 40,000 miles. I'm the second owner, and honestly, she's probably the coolest part about me. But enough about me. Let's get this presentation started. But first, a brief commercial break.
Coming April 17th, the unexpected, the new Ford Mustang. Brilliant new kind of car. A new generation of Fords for the new breed of Americans who want stick-shift action and room for four, who collect sports car badges and trading stamps, who want the elegance of a European touring car and till now had to settle for basic transportation. This is for them. This is Mustang. With an unexpected variety of options, Mustang is the one car that's designed to be designed by you. Get ready to meet the unexpected April 17th at your Ford dealers. Mustang is only days away.
17th, 1964, the unexpected, the all-new Ford Mustang, one of the most iconic vehicles of all time, and the true original pony car, was introduced to the world, and the world fell head over heels in love. Mustang was always designed to be designed by you, and for 60 years, that has been celebrated by enthusiasts all over the globe. Its fun, fast, and affordable nature has been the key to its success. From car clubs to forums, Facebook groups to Instagram handles, there is literally no shortage of Mustang content to share, learn, and love. During the 1960s, the one, the only Lee Iacocca predicted that the huge youth market would crave sports car styling and performance combined with the practicality of 4 seats and a usable trunk. However, to convince the man whose name was on the side of the building, especially after the failure of the Edsel, sorry for anybody who owns Edsels, Iacocca needed a team. Enter the Fairlane Committee. Now, who was this Fairlane Committee? Well, they were a team of engineers, stylists, product planners, market researchers, racers, public relations specialists, and advertisers who met twice a month to identify a market that would lead to the concept of a new vehicle. Now, after 14 weeks, market research did show the need for a new sporty compact car, so Iacocca was definitely onto something. So what did the research find? Well, baby boomers would reach car buying age in the mid-1960s, exactly what Lee had predicted. And they were also not intrigued by traditional styling once favored by their parents. Actually, Henry Ford II once famously said, well, the cars can't get any longer, so. And the booming economy also meant that families could actually add a second car to their lineup for pretty much one of the first times ever. Now, of course, with any launch, there had to be some sort of requirements. Well, they needed to have 4 seats with a trunk, a 2,500-pound weight limit, a retail price under $2,500, and a long hood, short deck styling, which was actually very popular in Europe. So at the time, a lot of designers would, look overseas to see what was trending, and they saw, okay, that long hood, short deck styling, let's try to bring that to the North American market. So it was actually Europe that actually was the spearhead for that particular type of style. Now, to save on time and cost, Special Projects Assistant Hal Spirlick, and if you ask anybody in the Mustang community, they usually kind of identify Hal as the true father of the Mustang, not Lee Iacocca, but it was his genius, his solution to build the new car on the Falcon's existing chassis, drivetrain, and suspension. I mean, that makes sense. Why would you build a car from scratch when you can look at another vehicle in the lineup and say, oh, that Falcon, yeah, that seems to have the right proportions. Maybe we should probably start with there. Now, with less than 28 months remaining before target introduction, Iacocca launched a design contest. That seems like a pretty smart idea. Let's kind of invite a bunch of people and see what they can come up with. Now, with his trademark cigar, Iacocca picked out Joe Orris's clay model, which was inspired by Gail Halderman, the winner of the design competition. So it was basically said Lee Iacocca was known for smoking cigars, but if he did that signature twirl, that means he really liked something. Now, with Gail Halderman, I actually had the privilege and pleasure of knowing him. He's the original Mustang designer. He actually has a museum in Tip City, Ohio. Raven is actually, there's a picture of her on display in his museum. Incredibly humble man, and has had amazing stories of Ford. So if you want to hear a Gail Halderman story, feel free to ask me after the seminar. Now, before I go to the next slide, I kind of also wanted to make this a little interactive. So I have a question for the audience. What is unique about this photo? Can you pick out anything specific? Sorry? The date. Okay, we have the date. Anything else?
57, or the early bird in the background.
Actually, there was a gentleman I heard over here. What's in the corral? Huh, funny looking horse. That doesn't look like a horse at all. That looks like a cougar. Which kind of actually leads me to my next slide. Now, John Conley, from J. Walter Thompson, or JWT, which was the marketing agency for Ford at the time, was dispatched to the Detroit Public Library to compile a list of animal names. What names were on the list? Well, they had narrowed it down to the 6, and these were the 6 in the running: Bronco, Cheetah, Colt, Puma, Cougar, and Mustang. Believe it or not, Cougar was actually the front runner and what Lee Iacocca preferred, which is why you see a cougar in the corral on that clay model. Now, it was originally suggested to honor the P-51 Mustang fighter plane, but it was later associated with the horse. And why is that? Because Mustang had the excitement of wide open spaces and was American as hell. Now, the running pony emblem, which was penned by stylist Phil Clark, is in the bottom right-hand corner right there. And then the modeler, which is pictured, is Charles Carestes. So again, you'll notice something very interesting here, and I have another question for the audience. You'll see that the original sketch, the pony is facing one way, but the model, the pony, is facing the other way. Can anyone tell me why they ended up actually going with the pony facing west? Does anyone have any?
Go west.
Okay, go west. Anyone else? Way horses run. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a part of it. Here's another little hint. The Mustang is a wild horse, not a domesticated racer. This really speaks to the ideology of what Mustang is. Ford did not want to jump on the bandwagon. It wanted to create something new and something different. So simply facing the pony in the opposite direction of what you're used to makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, unpredictable, and truly gives you a sense of freedom. You don't want to follow the pack. You want to lead it. Now, Ford ramped up one of the most expensive vehicle launches in American history. Commercial slots, full-page ads in major newspapers, magazines with double-page spreads, and the most iconic, which is what you see on the screen right now, a Mustang on the top of the Empire State Building. So I have another question for the audience. How did they place the Mustang on the observation deck of the Empire State Building? Does anybody have any guesses on how it got up there?
Brought up the elevator in pieces.
Bingo, yep. The Mustang was disassembled, put into the elevator shaft, and brought all the way up the Empire State Building. 50 years later, for the 2015 launch, they actually decided to recreate this photo with a convertible Mustang. So, pretty crazy. Now, in addition to this, Mustang would also be introduced at the opening of the 1964 New York World's Fair. Now, in one day, ladies and gentlemen, one day, Ford salesmen wrote 22,000 orders, creating a 2-month backlog, even with the additional manufacturing plants. So some of a little VIN knowledge for you. If you look at a Mustang VIN, those early Mustang VINs, that second slot, if you see the letter F, that means that it was Dearborn manufactured. Then what they ended up doing was actually adding 2 more additional plants, one in San Jose, which is denoted by R, and one in Metuchen, New Jersey, which is denoted by T. So the next time you go to a Cars and Coffee and you see an early Mustang, ask the owner if you can see the VIN, look at that second slot and be like, hey, did you know that your Mustang is manufactured there? They're gonna think that you're pretty smart. Now, by the end of Ford's 1964 production cycle in mid-August, Mustang sales had reached 121,538. By the end of the extended 17-month 1965 model year, Ford had sold almost 681,000 Mustangs. And then a few months after the 1966 Mustangs arrived, sales topped 1 million. This is unheard of at the time and is still incredibly impressive today. Now, before I go on to the next slide, I have another question for you, a little significance about the photo that you see on the screen. What is the name of the person in the driver's seat? Bingo, Captain Stanley Tucker. Oh, I love how you guys all know these answers. Okay, so fun little story about Mr. Captain Stanley Tucker. So essentially at the time, they used a lot of Mustangs for promotional vehicles. They would bring them to Canada, and it was actually in a St. John's dealership. It was in the window. Captain Stanley Tucker basically walks on in, sees the car in the window, and basically goes right up to a dealer or a salesman and says, I want the car in the window. And they're like, oh, I don't know about this, but they actually ended up selling it to him. Now, his Mustang that he had bought that day is actually VIN 1. What's really interesting about this is what a lot of people don't know, but if you have Marty reports, you'll probably know. There are no Marty reports from 64 to 66, because essentially Ford erased their own records to make room for 67. So basically what ended up happening is that Ford lost track of VIN 1 for 2 years. It took them that long to figure out where it was. Now, by that time, they had the millionth Mustang. So once they were able to find Captain Stanley Tucker, they said, hey, you know what, what about if we do some sort of trade? You give us back VIN 1, and we'll give you the millionth Mustang. And he decided to agree to that. So if anybody's from Michigan or plan to go to Michigan, if you go to the Henry Ford Museum, you will see VIN 1 on display, and she still sports her St. John's license plate. But before I go to the next slide, just another little kind of question for you. What's really interesting is that there is a woman, she's still alive today, still has the car. She actually bought a Mustang 2 days before it was unveiled. She, again, walked into a Ford dealer and wasn't really too crazy about any of the cars on the lot or inside. And the salesman's like, come here, I got something for you in the back, but you can't say anything. So he brings her to the back. She sees the Mustang, and she literally buys the car 2 days before. So what's really interesting, and maybe something you can kind of ponder over, who's the first buyer? Is it the one who bought 2 days before the unveil, or is it the person who has VIN 1? Something to think about. Now, I want to actually start talking about all the different generations of Mustang. And of course, we gotta start with the first, my absolute favorite, the first generation of Mustang, which goes from 1964 to 1973. So we've now all learned that the 65 Mustang was a huge success, arriving just in time as the oldest baby boomers reached car buying age, exactly what Lee Iacocca predicted. But the Mustang appealed to other demographics as well, which kind of caught them off guard. It actually appealed to grandparents. Women especially fell in love with its compact size, secure handling, and base 6-cylinder engine. Yes, Mustang has 6-cylinder engines at the time. So if you have a 6-cylinder, don't feel inadequate, because that's what was available at the time as well. Now, it was also available with the 289 V8, and that became synonymous with Mustang performance, especially the K code. Again, with VIN and data plate decoding, there's 3 289s. There's an A code, C code, and K code. Your K code is your high performance. Your A code is your 4-barrel. Your C code is your 2. That's how you kind of denote the differences. But that gets into a little bit of the nerdy details. But anyways, we also had the introduction of the one, the only Performance is My Business, Mr. Carroll Shelby, who famously once said, I don't know, you can't turn a mule into a racehorse. Well, his GT350 and GT500 definitely say otherwise. And remember, a car makes a name. A name doesn't make a car. As a matter of fact, the vehicle on the screen right now belongs to Hunt Palmer Baum, who is actually in the audience today. He's actually owned the car since new. It is the lowest mileage Night Mist Blue 1967 GT350 in the US, and is the most awarded Shelby ever. Feel free to talk to Hunt after the seminar to learn more about his story. He actually has a book as well. He has one copy that he is selling, so if you would like to have his book, again, he can tell you all about his story, an absolute perfect example of a Shelby. Now, does anyone actually know what GT350 means? Yeah. What does it mean?
It's 350 feet from the office to the plant door.
Close. 350 steps from, yeah. So essentially, Carol had, talked to one of his buddies and be like, hey, can you walk from here to there? How many steps? 347? 350. There's the name. So there you go. Now, restyled for the 67 to 68, the 390 S code, which is the one that Raven has, big block, was added to compete with the Camaro, Firebird, and Cougar. Now, at this time, Mustang finally shed its Falcon roots for a fresh all-Mustang cockpit. So again, kind of those early Mustangs, especially when they were launched, were known as pre-production cars or pilot cars. And again, it was based off the Falcon. So there's a lot of, when you sit in a 64 or 65, when you sit in a 65 or 66 Mustang, you're gonna see a lot of kind of Falcon parts going on. I actually have an article that I wrote for Mustang 360 that specifically talks about VIN 2, which is actually the first hardtop Mustang in Caspian Blue. It's a perfect example of a pre-pilot car. If you're interested in learning more about that car, I can share the article that I wrote with you as well. Now, a muscular design came from 1969 to 1907, and 11 engines, crazy, were available, ranging from the 6-cylinder to the 428 Cobra Jet and the famous Boss 302 and Boss 429 or Boss 9. Mach 1 and Grande models were also added. Now, Mustang grew even larger from 1971 to 1973, especially to accommodate larger engines like the 429 Cobra Jet. But however, government emission regulations impacted the big block saga, which is the perfect segue into the next generation, known as the Mustang II, probably the most, unliked Mustang ever. It ranges from 1974 to 1978. Now, although the 1965 was claimed to be Iacocca's baby, the 71 to 73 was not the small, sporty car he had originally envisioned. Now, Ford President Bunky Knudsen had pushed for the larger size, but by this time, Iacocca was free to investigate a Mustang overhaul that would return the car to its small car roots. And because it was such a radical departure from the 71 to 73 Model 2, was added to the name. As a matter of fact, it is a whopping 18 inches shorter and 4 inches narrower than the previous 73 model. Now, 2 months after the introduction of the 1974 Mustang, American fuel prices soared during what you might be familiar with, the OPEC oil embargo. So once again, Iacocca's hunch was correct. A smaller, more fuel-efficient Mustang was the right car at the right time. Now, in this particular situation, they had seen what the Japanese domestic market was doing, and they were already kind of ahead of the game going with those smaller engines. So again, they saw that trend, they brought it to the North American market, and honestly, even though this is not extremely loved, this vehicle saved Mustang. Now, the Mustang II also evolved following complaints of the lack of power, because if you're not a Mustang enthusiast, I mean, more power. We need more power. They actually dropped a V8 for 1974, and people were so upset that Ford's like, okay, maybe we need to bring it back. A 302 cubic inch was added in 1975, the Cobra II added for 1976, and the King Cobra you see on screen for 1978 to help with the performance image. Because we all know when you have a snake decal or decal on the hood, it's obviously faster, adds +5 horsepower, clearly. So that kind of tried to help the performance image. Now, moving on to the third generation, which goes from 1979 to 1993, it's now taken on a more European appearance. The 1979 model lost its traditional pony car cues in favor of a slanted front end, lower hood, and slab sides for sleeker aerodynamics, and which actually resulted in fuel economy gains. Who would have known when you have a slanted front end, you actually get better fuel economy. Now, what's very interesting about this is that the Mustang script and running horse emblems, do you see them? I sure don't. It's not there. Because they were replaced by a simple Ford oval on the hood. This is the only Mustang generation where there is no running pony, which is kind of crazy. Now, codename Fox, during its development, the resulting all-new Mustang became known as the Fox body during its 15-year tenure. Now, 1979 to 1981, they were powered by low-input engines, but in 1982, we saw the return of the GT and the optional 5.0 or high output or HO. The HO evolved into a 4-barrel Holly carb in 1984, and what happened in 1986, ladies and gentlemen? Fuel injection. So after almost a decade of fuel economy and emissions, SVO, which is Special Vehicle Operations, that particular team at Ford decided to offer a turbocharged model from 1984 to 1986, and then they decided to close out the era with the iconic Cobra R. Moving on to the fourth generation, which runs from 1994 to 2004, this is where the Mustang faced crisis in the late 1980s. As Ford planned, believe it or not, to replace the rear-wheel drive platform with the Mazda front-wheel chassis. Pretty crazy. And although Miata is always the answer, wasn't the answer so much in this case. With one of the biggest letter-writing campaigns ever, people wrote to Ford in droves, okay? Mustang loyalists actually won, and the rear-wheel platform stayed, all thanks to our savior, Mr. John Coletti. Now, does anyone know the name of the vehicle that actually became the front-wheel drive platform after they decided? Sorry? The Ford Probe, which is clearly the greatest name of all time, but anyways. Now, codename SN95, the new Mustang brought back classic styling, but the engine options were simplified to 2. We went from 11 engines in the 60s, and now we got 2. What's going on? But there was a V6 for the base model, and the continuation of the 5.0-liter V8 for the GT with the Ford Special Vehicle Team. So we went from SVO, Special Vehicle Operations, to SVT, which is Special Vehicle Team, which added the 240 horsepower Cobra model later that year. For 1999, the Mustang's body was updated to reflect Ford's New Edge styling. So for anyone that has an SN95, you'll know that there was a refresh. That refresh design is known as the New Edge. And from 1994 to 2004, models were then first equipped with independent rear suspension for better handling and improved ride quality. Now, nearing the end of its production cycle, two special models came into the mix. The 2001 Bullitt GT, which actually really helped to fuel dwindling Mustang sales, and the 2003 to 2004 Mach 1 with that iconic shaker hood scoop, which was a throwback to the 69 and 70 models. So just a brief little history about SVO and SVT. So again, SVO, Special Vehicle Operations, SVT, Special Vehicle Team. That all then turned into Ford Racing, and now all of that is Ford Performance. So just kind of a little timeline there of that. Now, going into the fifth generation, which runs from 2005 to 2014, after essentially 25 years of Fox body Mustangs, Ford recognized the need to bring Mustang to the new millennium. This included a stronger chassis and modern coil-over strut suspension. Now, the Lincoln LS was a great starting point, but by the time Team Mustang finished adapting it for Mustang, it earned its own code name. Enter S197. Now, the designers were challenged to continue the retro styling cues that proved so popular. But they also needed to bring it into the modern era. The design was so successful that the Pony Cars competitor, Camaro and Challenger, followed suit, which essentially reignited the horsepower wars of the 1960s. Now, a minor styling update did come for 2010, which made the Mustang leaner and meaner. The 5.0-liter name reappeared as a new 4-valve Coyote V8 with 412 horsepower. The 302 cubic inch also opened up the door for a new Boss 302, so you kind of see that verbiage re-enter the language. And then SVT stepped up their game with the 2013-2014 Shelby GT500 sporting 662 horsepower. Ford also brought back the California Special and once again brought a Bullitt into the marketplace. Kind of just a little bit of an offshoot here regarding the California Special. Does anyone know the predecessor of the California Special? Ooh. Okay, so the predecessor of the California Special is actually called the High Country Special. There were only 251 produced, and it was dealers in Denver that actually wanted to create that program. Now, California saw the success of the Denver program and said, hey, we want to do that here. We want to create a GTSC. Hold on a second, did she just say SC? Yes, because as a matter of fact, it was known as Sport Coupe. But then they changed the letters, and now it's the GTCS California Special. Bullitt is also really interesting. I helped launch that vehicle. If you have any questions about that particular vehicle, it's pretty crazy. For those who don't know Bullitt, in 1968 there was a famous movie with Steve McQueen. He drove a 68 S code in the movie, but Ford didn't actually come out with a Bullitt at the time. It wasn't until 2001 that they decided to kind of bring back a Bullitt, and then it was brought back again, and then most recently in 2019, so that's pretty interesting. Now moving on to the sixth generation, that runs from 2015 to 2023. Going global was the mantra behind the sixth generation Mustang, destined to debut as a 2015 model in time for the Mustang's 50th anniversary. Crazy how that was already 10 years ago and we're celebrating 60 years today. Or, well, 60 years on April 17th this year. Now, there was a need to replace the rough-riding solid rear axle with a modern independent rear suspension and also develop a right-hand drive to appeal to buyers in Great Britain and Australia. Because again, this was the first time they were going global. They needed to appeal to a European market. Actually, just a kind of a little fun fact before I go on to my next point here. But back in the 60s, Mustangs that were actually in Germany were not known as Mustangs. They were known as, does anyone know? T5. Ding, ding, ding. Now, adding IRS to the 2015 Mustang codename S550 led to a new front suspension as well. The base Mustang came with a V6, and the GT was powered by the V8, which was a 435 horsepower Coyote 5.0 liter. But Ford also added a third train, in the form of an EcoBoost 2.3 liter EcoBoost, which was a turbocharged four-cylinder combination producing 310 horsepower and 31 miles per gallon. Isn't that insane? You have my Raven with a 390 cubic inch, which maybe has about 325 horsepower, and then you got this little dainty 2.3 liter almost doing as much as my 60s car. Kind of crazy, but I mean, if we want a perfect example of a EcoBoost engine, I mean, Ford GT V6 EcoBoost won Le Mans. Like, it's pretty crazy what these EcoBoost engines can actually do. Now, making a big splash during the 50th anniversary was a 50-year limited edition, often to only 1,964 or 1964 buyers in Wimbledon white, a very iconic color, and Kona blue. Now, SVT, again, special vehicle team, was back with the Shelby GT350 and actually GT350R, and they later brought back an all-new Shelby GT500 with 760 horsepower. It's actually the most latest Shelby that does not come in a manual transmission, but is actually offered in DCT, which is dual clutch trans. Now, this next slide is my least favorite slide, and once I flip the slide, you'll know why. Yep, you're gonna make me talk about this, aren't you? Okay, well, this is the Mustang Mach-E, I like to use quotes, or what I like to call the phony pony. First introduced in November of 2019. Yeah, can we get a round of applause for the phony pony? Let's come on. So, I was actually there when this vehicle launched, and boy, do I have stories. That would probably take a whole other presentation. But anyways, some interesting tidbits about this vehicle. Ford had created a group known as Team Edison, who were tasked to create Ford's first all-electric vehicle from the ground up. So if you're thinking, wait, Natasha, what about the Focus Electric? But Focus Electric was already built on the Focus. This was a whole new car built from the ground up. Now, in 2017, there was talk about an electric Mustang, and many loyalists pushed back. I wonder why. Now, in 2018, there was a tweet that went out on Ford that showed a Mustang and SUV enter into a building, some Frankensteining happens, and Mach 1 gets flashed on the screen. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, loyalists were furious on using the Mach 1 name on such a vehicle, and you would think that that would be a red flag to Ford that maybe Mustang branding was a bad idea. But here we are. Now, originally, the vehicle sported a Ford Oval on the front. However, it was Jim Farley who wanted Mustang branding. So if you want to point the finger at anybody, you point it at him. Now, believe it or not, what a lot of people don't know, and this is hush, hush, Team Mustang was brought on board after the fact and also pushed back. I was part of the team that created a 50-plus page deck to explain why this vehicle should not be a Mustang. In 2019, the narrative changed to Mustang-inspired SUV, which also created a lot of confusion and pushback, as you can imagine. Then in 2020, the vehicle was officially launched, and to everyone's surprise, what do we have on the front of this car? Well, that looks like a pony, doesn't it? It was full Mustang branding. Now, however, Mustang and Ford's social pages were filled with the sentiment that the vehicle was, and I quote, not a Mustang, which is the same sentiment Ford experiences to this day 5 years later. Now, moving on to 7th generation, which is 2024 to current, this is the most exhilarating and visceral yet, with a digital cockpit, new advanced turbocharged and naturally aspirated engines, and an edgier yet exterior design. It has the most technologically advanced driver-centric cockpit of any Mustang to date, with features like a 12.4-inch digital instrument cluster, which can be customized to display different animated designs and new drive mode dependent visuals. So if you want your dash to look like a Fox body, you can do that, which is kind of crazy. It's sporting 60s-inspired styling. The new Mustang does something a bit different, with each model in the Mustang lineup carrying its own unique front end. We've never seen that before. Now, the new Mustang GT is powered by an advanced 5.0-liter Toyota V8. This new iteration, 5.0, delivers the most naturally aspirated horsepower of any Mustang GT, thanks to its dual air intake box and dual throttle body design. One moment, I'm just gonna take a little sip of water here. Now, Dark Horse is the first new Mustang Performance Series in 21 years, and is the most track-capable 5.0-liter V8 street-legal Mustang ever, projecting over 500 horsepower. A little tidbit about the Dark Horse name. That was actually the internal name for the Mustang Mach-E. They actually brought in focus groups and they really gravitated towards Dark Horse, but they decided to drop the naming for the Mustang Mach-E and then adapt it for this. So it actually had a previous life as an SUV before. Now, it's also part of a broader launch of 6 new racing Mustangs that will compete globally in a variety of series, including GT3, GT4, NASCAR, and the NHRA Factory X Racing. And of course, most recently, you probably have all seen the 300,000 Mustang GTD, because they do also plan on competing in Le Mans as well. For millions of owners worldwide, the Mustang is more than a car. It's a lifestyle. One supported by clubs, parts manufacturers, suppliers, magazines, websites, and specific model registries. Yeah, there's a yellow Mustang registry, a red Mustang registry, a Boss registry this, and a Mach 1 registry that. Just crazy. The Mustang Club of America alone boasts hundreds and hundreds of regional clubs, not only in the United States, but also worldwide in countries like France, Italy, Taiwan, Brazil. These enthusiast organizations host thousands of shows, cruises, races, rallies each year, bringing owners together to celebrate their common allegiance to the Mustang. Few other brands, automotive or otherwise, can claim that kind of loyalty and devotion. 60 years later, the Mustang is still going strong. It has survived pony car competitions, 2 major fuel crises, economic downturns, being turned into an SUV, and more. Its pony car formula has appealed to everyone, both young and old. And that brings me to my final point. Everyone has a Mustang story. Whether their Mustang belonged to their father, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, friend, whatever, there is a legacy and passion there. They appreciate the culture, the impact, and the legendary status. And that's why simply saying, because Mustang, can wrap it up so nicely. Thank you, everyone, for joining the evolution of Mustang. Again, my name is Natasha DeMellis with Haggerty, and I'm going to kick it over to David to come up here and say a few words and possibly even hunt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Natasha, that's a wonderful presentation. We're lucky to all be here this weekend for the 60 years of Mustang. We've curated some great Mustangs. And Hunt is also here to tell a little bit about his story, his personal story, and his car story. And also over the weekend, we've also got the 1963 Mustang II concept here. It'll be on the show field tomorrow. We've got Dave Marchioni here from Detroit Historical Society. So feel free, ask him any questions tomorrow about the car. He'd be happy to answer them for you. But I'd like to introduce Hunt Palmer Ball here, just to say a few things about his car and Ed himself. Thanks, Hunt.
Well, I want to thank everybody for letting me come here tonight, this afternoon. Rob and Natasha have been so gracious. They've asked me to come and tell you my story. I probably never have done this before, but everybody tells me my story is very unique and it needs to be told. So I'm going to start here with my life. When I first started thinking about cars, I was really young. I was one of 7 boys in my family, and I'm the only one that did not want to go to college. I wanted to go to trade school. I wanted to learn how to work with my hands and my mind and do neat things instead of books and learning and all that kind of stuff. So Mom and Dad, they talked about it, and they weren't really happy about me going to trade school. But they decided that they would let me do it. So I went ahead and went to trade school and took auto mechanics for 2 years, and I graduated from trade school. And at the time, I was working part-time at the Texaco station, doing the things that I loved, getting experience, trying to fulfill my dreams of working on my cars and tinkering with everything in between. So after I finished working, or while I was working for the Texaco station, I drove a 56 Ford that I used to drag race all the time in F-gas. I was driving down Bardstown Road, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I've been there all my life, but I was driving down Bardstown Road one night to visit my grandmother. And I happened to pass this little Ford dealer on Bardstown Road that it was really kind of an old building. It didn't really strike me as being very fancy at all. But I looked over there, and I happened to see something in my eye that I've never seen before. So I thought, what is this? What is sitting in that showroom floor that I've never seen? So I went up a little bit further, and I did a big U-turn right in the middle of this busy road and headed back to this little dealership so I could go in and look at whatever this was. So just as I turned into the parking lot and I got out of my car, they shut all the lights off on me. They were closing for the evening. So I proceeded up to the showroom window, and I put my hand and my eyes and my nose up against that glass to see what the heck was in there. And I did not know what it was. I had no clue what it was, but it really made me happy. So I turned around, got back in my car, and I went down to visit my grandmother. And when I got there, she said, "Hunt, what are you so excited about?" And I tried to explain to her. I said, "Grandma," I said, "I just saw something I've never seen before in my life, and I've got to have it." She said, "You better calm down. You're going to have a stroke." So anyhow, I finished my visit with my grandma, and I went home, and I talked to my dad, and I said, "Dad," I said, "would there be any chance that we could go down to the old Ford store tomorrow night after you get home from work and look at this car, because I would really like to see about buying it?" And he said, "Well, son," I said, I don't see anything wrong with that. We'll talk to Mom and see if we can work this out." And so he did. He talked to Mom. She said, "Well, we can go after supper." So we did. Dad and I drove down. He said, I said, "Dad, you want me to drive or do you want to drive?" He said, "I'll drive. I don't want to ride in an old jalopy of yours." So anyhow, so we headed down to Bardstown Road, and we went to the dealership. And we walked in, and here's this beautiful, Mustang sitting on the showroom floor. It was black in color, and the salesman came up to me and he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, we'd like to look at this car." He said, "This is a beauty, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is." And so he proceeded to hand me a couple of brochures, and Dad and I, we started looking at it. So we started at one end of the car, and our eyes were really just all over this car until we got to this window sticker. We got to the window sticker, and Dad's eyes, he said, "No way." He said, "Boy, you can't afford this car." And I told him, I said, "Dad, you always told me if you wanted something bad enough and you wanted to work for it, you could have anything you wanted." I said, "Didn't you tell me that?" He said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he said, "Well, let's go before we get in trouble." So anyhow, we left the store, and we went back home, and Dad was going to go in and talk to Mother about this. And so I decided to go on outside and work on my old jalopy, because I didn't think this was going to go well. So anyhow, Mom and Dad, they were fighting, feuding, and carrying on, and Dad told Mom, he says, "I think we need to let Hunt have this car, because I've never seen him so excited about anything in my life." I said, "I think we ought to believe in him. I think we ought to trust him." And Mother says, "No 19-year-old boy needs a car like this. He's going to get himself killed." The answer is no. So I went ahead and went back outside and worked in the yard, and I was just piddling around trying to keep my mind off the car. And Dad says, I'm going to talk to Mother some more tonight. And he said, we'll find out maybe tomorrow what we're going to do. So I couldn't hardly wait for Dad to come home. I called him at work. He said, you're going to have to wait till I get home before I can give you an answer. So anyhow, I was out in the driveway. We just counting the seconds for Dad to pull in the driveway. So I said, Dad, what'd you find out? He said, well, he said, son, he says, I think we're going to buy a Shelby. I said, you're kidding. He said, no. He said, it's either we're going to buy a Shelby or we're going to get a divorce, one or the other. So my Mom and Dad, they were very supportive about this, and I told Dad, he said, boy, he says, how are you going to pay for this car? He said, I can't pay for it. He said, I've got 7 boys. I'm putting them through Catholic schools. And he said, I can't help you pay for nothing, and it was very expensive. $4,692 is what the car cost, plus tax. And so I told Dad, I said, well, I've got $800 saved up. And I said, I'd like to put that down on my car. And then I said, I will work. I'll promise you, if you sign for me on this car, you'll never have to pay a nickel for it. And so my car payments ended up being $162 a month for 3 years after my down payment. I made $1.60 an hour working at the Texaco station. So I knew in my mind, I said, this is not going to work. So I had to figure out how I was going to make some money. So I was looking at the newspaper, and I saw this job wanted ad at the Ford store, and they were looking for a new car get-ready technician. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. So I ended up going down on Friday to see if I could apply for this job, and I did. And Rodney Brown was the service manager at that time, and I talked to him about it, and he said, well, what kind of experience do you have? And I told him, I said, well, I've been to trade school, and I've been working at the Texaco station for almost 2 years. And he said, it sounds good to me. He said, I can pay you $3.50 an hour if that would work. And I said, that'd be great. He said, well, I'll see you here at 7 o'clock on Monday morning. So I started my career at the Ford store, and not knowing that my Ford store was a Shelby dealership. Well, it didn't take me long to figure that out, because I was up there putting hubcaps on, checking the timing, and servicing new car get-readies, and I was hearing all this noise and stuff going on back at the high performance department that really intrigued me more than what I was doing. So it come to find out we had a race car program at the dealership, and we raced a 66 Shelby GT350 in drag racing, and it was very, very successful. We set the E-Gas national record in 1970 with that little Ford car, which was amazing. And so one day I was kneeling over, putting the hubcaps on this 67 notchback Mustang, and this big tall fella came back and he said, Hunt, he said, how would you like to come to work for me? He said, I run the high performance department back here, and he says, I've been watching how you do things. He said, I think you would fit in just nicely. And boy, I said, I said, are you kidding me? I said, I said, yeah, I would love to do that. And he said, well, I'm going to have to check with Mr. Burns. The name of the dealership was Burns Ford. And he said, I'll check to see if I can cherry pick you from this new car get ready to come back here and help me. So he asked Mr. Burns, and Mr. Burns says, I think we can arrange that. So Buddy came back and told me, he says, we're going to work together, and you're going to help me with a race car, and we're going to service all the Shelby customers, and we're going to do all the customer warranty work and for the Shelby Mustangs. And he said, that's what we're going to do. But he said, you're going to have a really hard job, because you're going to be in charge of the inventory. He said, every time a Shelby transport comes in, you're going to be responsible for going out, checking the cars for damage, making sure the keys were right, making sure there was nothing wrong with the cars and everything was on them. So that's what I did. And so I told Mr. Burns, I said, I've ordered my 67 GT350, and I said, I would like to race my car. He says, I think that would be a good idea. He said, I can sponsor you, but not to the point where I do the other car. And so I said, well, I said, you know, I'm going to try to do that. So I was waiting for my car to come in. So I ordered a dark moss green GT350, okay? And so Tuesday morning when the Shelby Transport pulled in, there were 6 cars on the truck, and I was unloading all of them and going through my little spiel, making sure that they were okay. And I thought that my car was supposed to be delivered that day. Well, I was checking through all my paperwork, and then, you know, no Hunt Palmer ball, no nothing, you know. So, but the last car that was unloaded was a dark blue 67 GT350, and it had my name on it. And I said, this can't be. I said, I ordered dark moss green, and now I've got a dark midnight blue car. I said, this is not going to get it. So I took the paperwork, and I went up to my salesman that was up front, and I told him, I said, JB, I said, I was supposed to get a dark moss green 67 350. Don't you remember that? He said, yeah. I said, well, I ended up getting a night mist blue 67 350. He said, well, let me check on this paperwork. So he did. And he said, Hunt, I made a big mistake. He said, I checked the wrong box. And I said, what are we going to do? He said, I said, can we order a new car? He said, no, because you'll end up getting a 68. And I said, I didn't want a 68. You know, I knew what they were, and I'd already seen them. And I said, well, I said, I'm just going to have to. I pulled the car in my stall, and I got out of it, and I didn't even look at it. I was really upset. This was on a Friday evening. I said, I'm going to worry about this all weekend. So I thought about the car all weekend long. I said, well, maybe night mist blue won't be so bad. So the next morning, I go in, and I open the car hood up and check the motor, check the inside, you know, and then I opened the trunk. And just to let you know, Mr. Carroll Shelby was a very, very good friend of mine. I dealt with him quite a bit because I had to ask questions to him on customers' cars. And the last question that I asked him, a customer wanted the GT stripes put on the car. He said, well, we quit doing that in '66. So whenever I'd call Shelby American, I used to talk to Carol and his secretary, Martha, about 3 times a month maybe. And she always put me through to him. I don't know what it was about Mr. Shelby and me, but we really were good friends. Whatever I wanted, he let me have. And he helped me with many customers' cars, things, and it was just amazing. So I told Mr. Shelby the last time I talked to him that I was waiting for my 67 350 to be delivered. And he said, well, what are you going to do with that car? And I said, well, I plan on racing it if I can afford it. And I told him that Mr. Burns told me he was going to help me with the sponsorship, but he couldn't help me a lot. And so Carol asked me, he said, Hunt, he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 19. He said, what do you do down here? I said, I just basically run this whole department, just about. I said, I take care of all the customers' warranty work. I said, I receive all the cars. I said, I order all the high-performance parts. I work on everybody's cars, you know. He says, this is amazing. He said, I've never met a 19-year-old that does as much as you do, especially the way you're supporting me and my cars. He said, it's amazing. He said, so I'm going to sponsor you for your race car. And I said, you're going to what? He said, I'm going to sponsor you for with your race car. So the day that I got my Shelby, this story is being told for the first time today because Mr. Shelby asked me to keep this a secret because it was between me and him. And so, in fact, I just got permission to tell this story back in the winter when I was at Naples, Florida, by his grandson, Sean Shelby. I opened the trunk on my car, and it was full of race car parts. He had put everything that he wanted me to have in my trunk on that car, and there was no invoice. I had heads, camshaft, distributors, oil pans, everything I needed for that he wanted me to use to race with. And so I couldn't believe this. So I was standing there, at the back of my car looking at what was in there, and I just couldn't believe this was happening. So I looked up, and my boss, Mr. Burns, was walking down the aisle to come back to our department, which he did every morning because he loves the Shelby cars, just like I did. And he looked over in my trunk of my car, and he said, "Hunt, what is all this stuff in the back of this car?" And I said, "Mr. Burns, you're not going to believe this, but Mr. Shelby is sponsoring me to be a race car for Burns Ford." He said, "That's not going to happen." He said, "That can't happen." So he stomped off, and he went back to his office, and the first thing he did is he called Carol Shelby at his office, and he was reading the riot act to him about me and that stuff that was in that trunk of that car. He didn't believe me. So Mr. Shelby, he turned the table on that guy, on Mr. Burns, and made him feel about that high. He said, "I can't believe that a guy that's working so hard for you and so diligent on all the stuff that he does for you, that you did not believe what he told you." Because he thought I had taken the parts from our parts department and put them in his car. You know, that's what he thought. So anyhow, he came back about 3 hours later with his tail between his legs. And he said, "I just want you to know that Mr. Shelby just chewed me up one side and down the other for not believing in you." And he said, "But I'm going to tell you this has got to be a secret between me and you, because I will lose my dealership if this secret gets out." I said, "Well, that's totally up to you." I said, "You know, I'm going to keep my secret." And so the secret has just been told today. And I got permission because Sean Shelby, when I was in Naples, Florida, I was invited to come down to do the unveiling of the new Series 2 Cobra from Shelby American Inc. And so while I was down there, I thought, what better way than to ask Sean Shelby for permission to let this story go? So anyhow, I'm telling you all this today. So after all this is going on, you know, so the dealership closed 2 years later, and I was the last mechanic to leave because the salesman tried to start a union down there, and the old man that owned the dealership said, "I'm not going to let this happen. I'll just close the doors." So I left there and went to another Ford dealership, but I kept my car, you know, and we still raced. We raced every weekend, and we, you know, every chance I got, and it was very successful. I first started out running E-Sport. They did away with that class. Then I went to demodified production, and I was running 740s in the 8th on 7-inch tires, you know, and the car was just amazing to run. We ran and we won every time you could turn around. We were very successful with our car. So after that was all over with, the racing, I ended up getting married, and I told my wife, I said, "I guess we're going to have to sell the car." She said, "No, we're not. No, we're not selling that car. We'll put it away." So I was lucky enough to have a wife that was really a car girl that really helped me keep that car. And so the car right now has got 8,600 and some change miles on it. Most of those miles came from my drag strip days. And but if it wasn't for my wife, I probably wouldn't have the car today. She loved it as much as I did. So we put the car away until 2015. The car really received a thrashing when I was racing. I mean, drag strips are really hard on cars. So, but after they did away with the E-Sport class, I had to go to make my mind up to go to a different class. So I pulled all the stock engine, all the interior, everything out of that car that was meaningful, and I knew that it would get tore up if it was a drag car. So I put it all away, put it in storage, and we raced the car for 4.5 years. And so after that, we put it away for 15 years. We got it out in 2015, and I decided that we were going to put the car back the way it should be, you know. And so after we got it put back together, we did a complete restoration. I mean, just a complete restoration. And so after we were finished, I told my wife, I said, "I think this is the time we need to start sharing the car with everybody." So the first place we went was the Keeneland Concours in Lexington, Kentucky, and we won first place there. And that was the start of the career for 1412 Shelby. The people that were up there, I mean, Meekum was up there, all the people that were interested in this car, they said, "You need to show this to the world." So I started my my conquest on going to all these concours. So we've been to every major concours in the country, and we've won every major concours in the country. My wife and I, we sat down the other day for just kicks and giggles. She said, let's check to see what our winning ratio is on this car. So we've had the car for 57 years. We got all of our paperwork together. Every time we won something, we put it all together, we put the numbers together, and we ended up, we've got 67 first place wins with that car. It's never placed second. It's never placed second, never placed third, and we are the winningest muscle car in the country right now, today. So I'm very pleased, and I have showed my car at Cobble Beach a few years ago, won my class and won Best of Show. And so Rob McLeese and his family, they've been awfully nice to me, and I've been a judge for the muscle car class. I am a CCA master judge for the muscle car class, and I'm also the Shelby rep for the state of Kentucky since 1977. So I've been wrapped up with these cars for my whole life, and if it wasn't for Carroll Shelby helping me along the way, I wouldn't be here talking to you all today. But that's the story that everybody wanted me to tell, and that's the reason I'm here today. So. So I just want you all to know this car has opened every door in my life that could be opened. I've met so many nice people. Everybody that knows me associates me with a dark blue 67 Shelby. And everywhere I go, they say, well, there's Hunt. We don't have a chance. So, but I've been instructed by one of my mentors, Mr. John Carlson. He's the chief class judge here. He has suggested that I retire my car. He said, Hunt, you cannot win anything else. So he said, you can run your risk of hurting your record, and he said, I don't want you to do that. So we still take the car around, and we share our car with everybody that wants to see it. Just like I said, we just got back from Naples, Florida, and Shelby American asked us to come down there for that. And I asked Gary Patterson, I said, Gary, I said, of all the people that own Shelbys, why would you ask me about this, to come down here? He said, because your relationship with Carroll Shelby is second to none. He talked about you all the time. He couldn't ever believe a 19-year-old could do what you did for him down there, and he was very proud of you. He said, so we could not figure a better person to help us unveil the new Series 2 Cobra, because we feel that you're part of the foundation of this company, and we wanted you to be there. So I said, well, I just think it's wonderful that you asked me, and I said, yes, I will do that. So that's what I do. I share my car. I want everybody to see it. If anybody has any questions they want to talk to me about, I'd love to, answer anything y'all want to say. So with that, I'm done.
Perfect. Thank you, Hunt. That was a great story here. Always love hearing Hunt's stories about him and Shelby and his car. It's a wonderful, wonderful part of the Cobble Beach family here. So thank you for coming there. I thank you, everybody, for coming to the Evolution of Mustang Design Seminar. And we'll be just clearing out anybody that's staying for the second seminar here. Just sit tight. We'll get everything set up there, and we'll be on our way.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
They've reached the summit. Back-to-back Stanley Cup victories.
Greatness.
And a new legacy begins.
Absolutely amazing.
It has happened in Vegas.
Is not a destination.
And lightning has struck twice.
It is a continuous journey that never ends.
These are the moments you dream of. Stanley Cup champions.
Absolutely. Spooning definitely leads to forking. You just need to find the right spoon. I do construction and renovation. I have always been interested in fixing old things that people would throw out and bringing it back to life and finding new purpose. And yeah, I hate throwing things out, and I'm notorious for garbage picking. I guess the first piece I bent was back in 1994 in high school. It was a project about taking something that somebody has discarded and